Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our complimentary ICMI webinar, Mastering Multilingual Customer Support in the Contact Center, sponsored by Lionbridge. I'm Erica Maroy, Community Specialist here at ICMI, and I'll be your moderator today. And before we begin, I just want to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. So first, make sure to disable your pop-up blocker if you currently have it on. You will notice there are several icons at the bottom of your console window, and the first one allows you to see our presentation slides, so make sure this one is maximized. And next, you'll see a Q&A icon, and we plan to save some time at the end of our webinar today to answer your questions. So as you have questions throughout the presentation, all you have to do is type your question into that window and then click Submit. Now, if you experience any technical difficulties during our presentation, you can click the question mark icon on the console to access our event help guide for today. And clicking on the other icons you see on the console will give you access to bios for our speakers, more information about our sponsor, as well as some information regarding upcoming ICMI events, resources, and research. And before we get going any further, I do want to let you know that we are recording today's presentation, and it will be made available for on-demand viewing following our live event today. You'll receive an email within the next couple of days giving you instructions to view the recorded presentation. You can actually also download a PDF version of today's slides directly through this console. And as you're watching today, we really encourage you to be social. You can access your Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts all directly through this event console. So please keep the conversations going and share what you learn. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. I'm joined by ICMI's Community Director, Justin Robbins, and Justin was the lead analyst on the research results we'll be sharing today during our webinar. I'm also joined by Tom Ski, VP and GM of Customer Care Solutions at Lionbridge. And Tom is a veteran in the industry with years of experience in both contact center technology and customer experience strategies. So just a quick reminder, as I mentioned earlier, you can actually learn more about both Tom and Justin by clicking the speakers icon that you see here on your console. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to Justin to get us started today.
Great. Thank you, Erica. You know, I really believe that most, if not all of us, realize that great customer experiences don't happen by mistake or just some random miraculous circumstance. It takes an incredible amount of thought, an incredible amount of effort, but really us as leaders meticulously designing, expertly planning, and really just wonderfully executing these great customer experiences. And I know that for most of us, we account through that through the way that we're designing and planning within our contact centers and within our organizations. And really over the past few years, so many of us, we've increased the number of channels that we've offered. We've implemented new technologies. We've changed the way we train our employees. It's just this really exciting change. It gets me, as someone who's been working in contact centers for a long time, it just gets me excited of this place that we're in and watching the rapid growth and all of the innovations that are happening in our organizations. And what got me really excited is a couple of months ago, we started having a conversation with Lionbridge, and particularly the group that's working with something that they've called GeoFluent. And we just started talking about how this change in expectations has really transformed the customer landscape. And in fact, we went back and we looked at research that research ICMI did in 2013. And back at that time, we were just trying to take a look at that where contact centers were at in providing multilingual customer service in general. And when we looked at that study, we realized that something happened 3 years ago. Really, the majority of that research was focused on voice and really just looking at what was happening in the voice channel and how organizations were providing service and multilingual support there. And we kind of had this aha as we were having our conversations that so much has changed in our organizations since that time, and we've added so many more channels, and the complexity has just grown. We realized that maybe it was time for us to go back and look at contact centers today and take a new look at language and understand how we were supporting customers who spoke in primary, meaning the main language that our contact center was supporting, or non-primary languages. So those that maybe we have to use alternative resources, other solutions to provide. And so we did that. Earlier this year, we conducted a study of the ICMI audience to really understand their state, I guess, of multilingual support across all of their contact channels. And so to get us started, I want to give you a little bit of a background on that research. And we had 526 respondents to our study, and 89% of them were organizations who are headquartered in the United States. And so that became very telling as we went through the rest of the research, because the majority of these organizations, their primary language is English. And we'll take a look at what some of the other languages that they support, but for the majority of people who took this study, English is what their agents know and are fluent in on a day-to-day basis. You can see that we had a fair share of organization size represented. About a third are in the smaller contact centers, about a third are mid-sized, and then we have about a third that are larger-sized contact centers. And we were really pleased with the role that the individual respondents play in their contact center, as the majority of them are managers, but we also saw a good representation of director and executive level contact center leaders. Just to give you a little bit more of an understanding about who these contact centers are and what they support today, I thought it would be good to start with asking the question of, do you support customers who aren't native speakers of your primary language? And so we found out that the customer bases of the ICMI audience and really of contact centers as a whole, they have an incredibly diverse customer base. In fact, we found out that 79% of contact centers today have customers who aren't native speakers of the primary languages that they serve. And this was enlightening for me, as I've run a number of contact centers, and I find that running a contact center, we tend to have kind of blinders on a little bit too. We just see what we experience, you know, for the most part of our day. And if for the most part we're experiencing, example of the contact centers in the United States, for the most part, if they're just experiencing English contacts, maybe we tend to think that that's most of what our customer base is. And it was exciting for us to see that, no, in fact, most of us have customers who aren't speaking our primary language. And so then we wanted to dive in and thinking, okay, so if we have a large kind of group of customers or even potential customers out there who don't speak our primary language, maybe though they have the expectation, right? Maybe they have the expectation that when they call us, they know that our organization is in the United States, or they know that we're based in Spain, or they know that we're based in Beijing, wherever it is. Our customers know that. And you know what? They probably expect that they're going to have to speak in whatever our primary language is. Well, our research found out the opposite. Our research actually uncovered that when customers contact us, a majority of them, 60+%, expect that they'll be able to communicate in their native language when they contact us. And when I saw this findings, when we really kind of dug into the results of the study, I took a step back and I thought about myself as someone who gets to travel to different regions of the globe, and I realized that, yeah, you know what? When I'm somewhere, it doesn't matter whether I'm in Mexico, whether I'm in the UK, or whether I'm in India, there's this expectation that people will communicate with me in what's most comfortable for me. And so it's kind of, you know, made me step back for a minute and think that, well, wait, as we're planning for our organizations and we're planning to create these great customer experiences, do we as contact center leaders, do we expect that we're going to have not only a percentage of our audience who isn't speaking that primary language, but also they're going to expect that we're going to be able to serve them in their language when they're contacting us? And so that's what we dove into with this research. We dove in to understand, okay, if a majority of us have customers who don't speak the primary language, and a majority of those customers expect us to give them service in their native language, how well are we meeting those expectations today? And so over the next couple minutes, just want to share some of those findings and some of the thoughts around what can we do to maybe better support customers who are in these non-primary languages, or maybe I want to highlight some of the things that we're doing fairly well. And so I want to start here with, okay, we know that we have customers who speak other language, we know they have the expectation. Is that going to stay the same? Is it going to go down, or is it going to increase? And what we need to realize as we're planning for the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months, even next 3 years, is that most contact centers, they expect to see an increase in the volume of those non-primary language contacts over the next 3 years. And so dug in a little bit, just wanted to understand what's driving this. What are the things that they're doing to really make this change? And for the most part, these companies are seeing that they're getting increased exposure, that their products are now in really a global marketplace. And as a result of that, their customer bases are growing. Now, some of them are actively pursuing this, and others it's just a byproduct of this is the world that we live in. With so many channels available, and it's so easy for us to put our products online and have them be accessible to people anywhere, right? We're going to see that increase in customer contacts. And so then I wanted to understand it and take a look at, okay, so you're expecting this increase in contacts from customers who don't speak your primary language, and we know that customers are expecting us to support their primary language. So how are we doing today in our ability to serve them? And so I looked across all the channels that are offered by these organizations, and I wanted to know, are you supporting your primary language? Are you supporting some non-primary languages? Any language? What does that look like today? And the really scary thing that I found out is that 19% of organizations can support customers of any language over the phone. Right, so going back to that expectation of a customer who has whatever language they speak, it doesn't matter. They have that expectation that we're going to be able to serve them in that language, and only 19% of organizations today can do that on the phone, and that's just the phone. What gets really kind of worrisome here is looking at other channels, looking at chat or social media or texting or knowledge bases or self-help, and the percentages go down drastically. Right, drastically, they decrease. And when I look at the non-primary languages that are supported, right, just under 50% support Spanish, but then we decrease to just over 20% support French, and then even less for Japanese or German or French Canadian Mandarin, and it goes on. And so what we found is that really organizations today want to provide great customer experiences, and we recognize that we have a diverse customer base, but really providing service across all of those languages and across all of those channels is challenging. It's hard to do that. It's complex, and it could be a complicated strategy to put in place. And so our solution today, for when those customers call and they can't speak our primary language, we just have our agents apologize. That's it. The strategy today is, I'm sorry, I don't speak that language. Can I help you in the language that I do speak? And really, from that point, it becomes a hope and a prayer of, maybe this will work. Maybe this will work and that customer will be satisfied. Maybe this will work and the agent will get through the interaction somehow, or maybe it won't. And what was kind of, again, enlightening about this study is we were able to really dig in on some of the metrics to understand what is the impact to first contact resolution or to customer satisfaction or to quality when we provide service in someone's native or primary language versus when we can't and when we just have to apologize. But before we get to that, I do want to take a look at and really recognize that I know I've been here, I've led contact centers, and I have been just as guilty of using this strategy of having agents apologize. And so some of the reasons why this is challenging today is for the majority, for most of us, it's finding and retaining those agents that we can have in-house who are either bi or multilingual. And I get it, again, we think about just our agents who speak the primary language in our contact center. We have a difficult enough time finding that talent pool, that being able to have agents in-house, depending on our geography, depending on what our local job market is like, depending on what languages we're trying to serve, right? There are a lot of considerations and a lot of complexities that can go into that. And so that's the number one challenge. The next group of us look at that real-time translation quality. And so what we find is that the resources that we're using to effectively translate those interactions, the quality is just not the best. And so the better solution maybe is to not serve them at all, or maybe to try to find another way. And so for some of us that maybe are using in-house agents, or maybe we are using a translation tool, or maybe we're not using those things, but another option is to look at using a contact center that has localized agents, right? And maybe partnering with an outsourcer or a solution provider that can help us create that agent pool, that can help us find that group. But that cost, right, doesn't come cheap. And so that's a challenge for some. And then for really the smallest percentage, it's just justifying that new language support. Really, for most organizations, they get it. They know that if their product is moving into a new geography, or if they've expanded into marketing a new demographic, that demand is there, and that it's just, right, it's a cost of doing business. If we want to have our customers coming to us from those localities, we need to be able to provide the support, provide the service in the language that best meets their needs and their expectations. And so wanted to also understand, what are some of the other strategies, though? What are the strategies, and how are contact centers supporting them today? And we did find that the largest percentage of contact centers that are supporting non-primary languages today are using it through those in-house agents. And so it's the most challenging solution, but it also seems to be the one that's most widely adopted today by using those in-house bi or multilingual agents. But again, talking and interviewing some of those leaders, they still have the challenge that even though they have those bi or multilingual agents, that still limits them on the languages that they can support. And so if they have agents today who speak Spanish, or they speak Mandarin, or they speak Vietnamese, whatever it would be, that language it just ends there with whatever that agent can support. And so if they want to add more languages, it means more agents, more timing, training, and more complexity. And so for some organizations, and we took a look at this in the 2013 research, some of them are using third-party over-the-phone interpreters. And so they're using that as a solution for handling multi-channel or even omni-channel and omni-lingual types of interactions. And then you can see on the screen that others are using that outsourced model. Some of them are using real-time second-generation translation software. And then the smallest group, right, are using those free tools. And in some cases, they don't even maybe know that this is a formalized approach, and it's an agent, acting out of desperation. They got an email from a customer in Portuguese, and they don't know a word of Portuguese, and so they search on Google and they enter the text, and then they translate it, and they translate it back, right? Really just this kind of ad hoc approach, and really these kind of ad hoc or just kind of one language here or two language their approach, it's having a significant impact on the metrics in our contact centers today. And so I want to take just a little bit of time to show what that looks like. And so the first place we wanted to look was customer satisfaction. And so we went out to these contact centers and we said, talk to us about customer satisfaction. And when you serve a customer in their primary language, does it have a positive effect on customer satisfaction? And the majority of contact centers said, yes, it does. When we're able to provide service in a customer's primary language, when we are able to have that common ground and have a conversation with them, they are more satisfied, and as a result, we see higher scores. And so then we went to Net Promoter Score, and we said, okay, we know Net Promoter Score is another metric that a lot of organizations look at to benchmark their success. And so we said, when it comes to Net Promoter Score, do you see that customers rate you higher when it comes to serving them in their primary language versus the customers who have to get that apology or whatever that other approach is to getting service? And again, the majority said that, yes, we see higher Net Promoter Scores when we are able to serve a customer in their primary language. Next thing we looked at was quality, and I want to stop here and mentioned something kind of alarming. When we asked, how do you measure or do you measure the quality of your non-primary language contacts, we actually found that one out of every 5 contact centers has no way of measuring the quality of their non-primary language contacts. So in other words, these interactions are happening and they have no idea whether the agent did a good job or a poor job. They have no idea whether the customer's issue was resolved or now is just kind of spiraling out of control. No insight whatsoever, right? And so we need to make sure that if we're supporting language, that we also have the ability to make sure that it's a quality interaction. But then what we also found out is for the other 80% that are measuring quality in some shape or form, we know that for a majority of them, when a customer gets service in their primary language, again, quality goes up. And really what I saved what I think was the most telling metric for last, and that was first contact resolution. And really the essence of first contact resolution is did we get it right the first time? Did we get it right the first time? And this is, first off, where we saw the largest percentage. The largest percentage of contact center leaders say that, yes, when we serve a customer in their primary language, first contact resolution increases, it improves, it goes up. But not only did we see the largest percentage there, but we also saw the largest jump in what happens to first contact resolution, where a very large percentage, actually the largest percentage out of any of the metrics we looked at, the largest percentage of a significant increase to first contact resolution happened when we provide service in a customer's native language. And so what was really telling to me as we dove in to these findings and as we looked at the full report, which I'm really excited about for us to release here in just a matter of days, but what was really excited is that this story was unfolding. The story was unfolding that, yes, the complexity of today's contact center is greater than it's ever been. And yes, we have so many channels of service that are being offered across our organizations. And yes, we need to now consider not just our primary language, but the fact that so many of us are organizations that are reaching a global customer base. And so many of us are going to have more and more contacts coming into our center each year of customers who are speaking a language other than that which we primarily serve today. And what I also saw, though, was this amazing story that when we acknowledge that and when we put the right pieces in place and we have the right strategy to effectively provide service, that we can see amazing improvements to our organization. And I know, as someone who led a contact center and looked at the metrics that I cared about and that my executive cared about, and to be able to tell them that we're going to see improvements in customer satisfaction, that our net promoter score is going to go up, that we're going to see improved first contact resolution, that we're going to see higher quality. If I walked into a meeting room and told someone that I knew how we could make that happen, I know that the question would be, okay, when can we do it, and what are you waiting for? Let's make it happen. And so the question that I really challenge everyone listening today is are we ready for that? Are we ready for this landscape that's ahead? Because it sounds very exciting to me, and it sounds very interesting. And yes, it'll be complex, and yes, we'll have to experiment and learn and ask questions, and there'll be places where we'll be challenged. But I think that this is an amazing kind of future that's ahead of us. And you know what I really, really hope is that we as organizational leaders, we recognize that there is now this emphasis on language as we expand our global footprints and as our customers grow in diversity. And what I really hope is that we seize that opportunity and that we don't miss that chance to improve the quality of our customer experience. And so I'm also really excited that we were able to partner with Lionbridge on this, and that Tom was able to join us today, because I know that they've also really been looking at their customer base and diving into things deeper here. And so Tom, I'm excited for you to share with us what are some of the things that you're seeing, and what are some other pieces from the research that really stood out to you and your team?
Great. Well, thanks so much, Justin. I appreciate that. So before I begin, for anyone that isn't familiar with Lionbridge, let me give you a bit of background and tell you a bit about us. So Lionbridge is the largest localization and translation company in the world. We're publicly traded on the U.S. NASDAQ under symbol LIOX. We have over 5,500 employees across 27 countries. So what we've done is we've taken our over 20 years of linguistic expertise and built GeoFluent, a second-generation translation platform built specifically for contact centers. GeoFluent, coupled with our more than 5,000 interpreters, enables contact centers to provide omnilingual support across all customer communication channels. So as we've learned from the study, many contact centers aren't well equipped to handle non-primary language interactions today. This certainly isn't due to unwillingness or lack of consideration, but really rather this is more of a factor of the traditional options that contact centers have available. So combined with the complexities and the cost around supporting them, it's a difficult proposition. So oftentimes the most important decision that must be considered is, does the volume of that language and the market opportunity warrant the investment in supporting the language? If it does, then you get into the questions of how do we do it? I'll get into those options momentarily. Other considerations that brands have to look at: how do we cover hours of operation? What hours of operation do we cover? Where do we provide the support from? What will the experience be like? What channels should we support? And how do these map to the cultural communication preferences? So let's quickly level set on the traditional options that are available for contact centers when we talk about providing language support. So the first and foremost, as we saw in the study findings, no support. Certainly it's a tough customer experience, especially if the brand has a localized website, yet offers no support in the language. So this can certainly leave customers feeling a bit deceived. The second, third-party interpretation, is traditionally a voice-only solution and offers a high-effort experience. Things like wait times, hold times, and finally, once you get to an interpreter, the conversation takes twice as long, so unfortunately not an ideal experience. However, it is ability to resolve the issue and get resolved, so certainly it's better than providing no support. Outsourcing, certainly a good solution, but as we saw from the study findings, 31% of respondents feel that cost of outsourcing is a hurdle to providing language support via that method. In-country contact centers provide great CX, but extremely costly and often create disparate approaches and systems and can add complexities to training, QA, QC, and internal knowledge-based materials. Back office support, essentially finding someone from, let's say, marketing, may not provide a great experience, but more importantly, doesn't scale. It also offers hours of service issues and considerations. In-house multilingual agents can provide a great experience, but factors like small queues, hard to attract and retain multilingual speakers, certainly make it difficult, particularly in offshore, nearshore type contact centers, where it's difficult to find the multilingual talent. And as we again saw from the study, 59% of respondents stated finding and retaining agents as a significant blocker to providing language support via in-house multilingual agents. Lastly, real-time translation. As we saw from the study, 40% are concerned with quality. So when talking about real-time translation, it will be important for us to differentiate between first generation and second generation. I'll talk more about that momentarily. But before I do, we wanted to jump in and just quickly get a poll, see how our audience maps compared to those 500 plus folks that did take our initial survey. So if I could have the audience quickly do a quick poll, we'll take a look at those results and see how they do map to the findings from our study. So I'll give everyone another, let's say, 20 seconds. So if you wouldn't mind, how does your contact center support non-primary languages today? And check all that apply. So as we find, there are particular languages, again, going back to the question of volumes and can we justify the cost, there are certain languages that we may support with in-house agents. There are other languages that we may use OPI. There are other languages that we just simply don't support. So that's why the check all that apply is applicable here. All right, so perfect. So we see from the audience about 42%, so it looks like in-country contact centers is first, third-party interpretation services are second, and then back office is third. So the stats are actually very similar to what we saw in our findings as well with in-country contact centers at 49% and use of third-party interpretation services at 37%. So certainly we're seeing some consistencies here. So now let's take a look at what is happening around communication trends and contact center initiatives and the impact of these on language support specifically. So from customer data and certainly industry research, we know consumers want channel options, and 2016 will actually be the first year that the data is showing digital channels are preferred by more than half of consumers. And that's across all generations and demographics. So we certainly know as you break into segments within that, you find significantly higher adoption rates. And then with 77% of consumers stating that valuing their time is the most important thing a company can do to provide a good customer experience, reducing customer effort is a major priority for contact centers. These consumer expectations, coupled with the priorities of the contact centers to shift from voice only to more multi-channel, omni-channel platforms, while also trying to lower costs and shifting their service models like nearshoring and offshoring, is making the language support puzzle exponentially more difficult. So what's the result of all these factors to the non-primary language speakers? So unfortunately, for the most part, they're seeing high effort, frustrating interactions, primarily supported only by voice, most oftentimes via OPI or over the phone interpretation. So even in cases where multilingual agents are employed, small queues often create high hold times, and self-service and digital channels are commonly not offered. So with all the discussion around multi-channel, omni-channel, and the investment around it, why should the non-primary language speakers have to expect voice-only support? So the good news is it isn't all bad. Let's get into the best practice approaches that can provide multi-channel support across all languages that are easy to implement and provide contact centers a quick payback and ROI while providing a significantly better customer experience. So when we talk about how can we possibly support all languages, there's a few options, right? One would be outsource all the languages or hire agents that cover every language. Obviously not practical, nobody does that. So the other option that we're now seeing on the forefront is what I call the three-pronged omnilingual strategy. So this is what the early adopters are doing, and I'll walk you through the three components here. So if we start in the middle, the in-house or outsourced agents that you already have today, you leverage those with third-party interpretation services, which will provide you voice, video, and on-site interpretation, and coupled with second-generation real-time translation. That's going to enable all your self-service channels, your forums, communities, your virtual assistants, and it's also going to enable your digital agent-assisted channels, things like chat, social, mobile, email, etc. So customized solutions to ensure brand integrity and actionable interaction with a positive customer experience is what second-generation real-time translation provides. This should not be confused with first-generation or straight machine translation, as it's often referred to, which, as you saw in the numbers that Justin presented, 40% of the survey respondents stated that was a blocker to utilizing real-time translation. So when pulling these three pillars together, organizations are able to offer multilingual support to all their prospects and clients and internal employees across all channels. So using an omnilingual strategy approach doesn't mean a complete overhaul of contact centers and can actually supplement how you run your contact centers today. Companies are using the three-pronged approach that I referred to in the last slide in 6 distinctive ways, depending on where they are in the language support maturity model. So let's quickly go through what those 6 ways look like. So most obvious is number 1, supporting language that they aren't currently staffed for or aren't able to support. Geographic expansion without hiring language talent, and that could also include localizing your websites or your e-commerce sites, so you can now inject things like proactive chat into the conversation and increase your close rates and your ability to service those clients that are reaching your websites. Another is SLA and broader service coverage. So what this allows me to do is, let's say today I have in-house agents, I can leverage and supplement that with the interpretation and with the second generation translation technology, and that will enable all my agents to become what I call omnilingual, which is the capability to support all languages. So I can use those for off hours, I can use those for follow the sun type models. If I have regional contact centers, I can now expand and I can gain efficiencies across the globe. Fourth, the regional centers of excellence versus having disparate in-country contact centers. So many brands, especially as they grow internationally, find in order to support a language, I have to go in country and set up a contact center there. So by taking the three-pronged approach, I'm now able to revert back from that and not have to localize in all these local countries, and yet I can support the languages from regional centers of excellence. Fifth is adding digital and self-service to reduce inbound calls, as well as OPI expense. So over the phone interpretation, when I add digital and self-service channels, by nature will deflect some of those inbound OPI calls. And while I'm doing that, I'm also providing a better customer experience. So how do we get started when we talk about Omni-Lingual? So if there are languages that you don't support, OPI, email, chat are probably easy places to start. So for those that are supporting non-primary languages, however, whether you use OPI, multilingual agents, or dedicated in-country agents, all of those conversations and interactions can be used to train and customize the second-generation real-time translation solutions. This will enable agent-assisted and self-service channels to be customized with your specific lingo, terminology, acronyms, product names, other terminology, and provide for a significantly improved experience over what first-generation machine translation offerings can provide. So what's the impact of providing omnilingual support? So now all prospects and customers get serviced on any channel in any language. So just to repeat that, so the ability, when I take that three-pronged approach, I can now work with all prospects and customers, and I can provide them service on any channel across any language. So they get to use their preferred channels, they can self-serve, they can digitally serve with minimal effort, and they'll experience lower hold times, lower wait times, with higher first contact resolution, which will result in higher CSAT and higher NPS. Contact centers get to leverage the benefits and ROI of self-service and digital channels while reducing the burden on in-country contact centers and reducing the risks of poor CX that come with smaller dedicated language queues, and or reduce their spend on OPI with the calls that have been deflected. So we're going to take another moment here and do another quick poll. So similar question that we asked in the study, which again you'll have access to in the next few days, but what we would like to see from the audience is what channels do you plan to omnilingual enable in your contact center over the next 12 months? And again, please select all that apply. So we'll give you another 20 seconds or so, and we'll match these up and see how these compare to what we found through the survey. All right, let's take a look. So chat, web, SMS at 78, voice at 65. And then it trails down, but then goes back up for email support and cases. So interesting. It's actually consistent with our research as well, which showed 71% of respondents would implement real-time translation for digital channels if the quality was good, while 68% would implement it for self-service channels, so things like forums and community. So quite a deviation on the forums and community side, but certainly pretty consistent across the other channels too, what the survey found. So then when we match that up to our language maturity curve, so this is really where we're looking at where are folks enabling omnilingual and multilingual capabilities, what channels specifically are they focused on. So not surprising, multilingual web is the most common. It's usually the easiest, right? So localizing the website for particular languages of which you think you may have customers and or prospects in. Again, so I mentioned some of the pitfalls of doing just that without being able to follow on with the support of that language. The late majority is providing voice only or OPI. And then when we start to get into the early majority, which is where I feel we are today as we're talking to brands and we're talking to BPOs and global companies, as looking at the voice and digital channels. So I think that's what we're going to see consistent in 2016 with contact centers implementing things like chat and some of the other digital channels. Omnilingual enabling them is an easy add-on. So I think we're going to see high levels of adoption continue throughout 2016. And then as all the data and research is suggesting, self-service certainly becoming a channel of the future, I'd anticipate that to kick in probably in the second half of 2016 and then continue with great strength up until 2020. And then again, virtual assistants certainly getting a lot of buzz, chatbots, things of that nature where I can do real-time conversation but not tie up an agent. So another great use case for omnilingual capabilities where if I have the virtual assistant, now I can provide those answers across all of my languages. So to summarize and keep some time here for questions and answers, second generation real-time translation has empowered contact centers to take a three-pronged approach to language support that provides significant advantages over the options that were available previously. They're able to interact on the channels that their prospects and customers speak and remove the language barrier while reducing cost, increasing revenue, and reducing risk. Most were able to Omni-Lingual enable their agents and or self-service channels within a matter of weeks. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Justin. This has certainly been extremely interesting and valuable. So thank you both for that. And as promised, we have saved several minutes here at the end to take your questions, and I've seen a lot of really good ones come in. So thank you guys for the participation. Feel free to keep them coming. One note, if we are not able to answer your question here live for some reason, we will be sure to follow up with you offline after the presentation to answer any questions that are left in the queue. And then one other thing really quick before we dive in, you should see a link that just popped up in your browser. That will take you to a really brief 6-question survey. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. Just looking for your feedback on today's presentation as well as advice we can use in the future to better tailor our presentations for your needs. So appreciate that. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. Like I said, I've seen a lot of great questions coming in. So Tom, I'm actually going to pose the first question to you. Can you give me an example of some contact centers that you've seen using real-time translation and what that looks like?
Sure. So I assume the question is probably around maybe a channel specifically. So why don't I start with the channel use case, and then if that doesn't answer the question, whoever posed it, feel free to add more additional context around it. So if we start, let's start with a chat, for example. So what we talk about when we talk about real-time translation, and again, I'll talk to the second generation, which I think is the most relevant for a customer interaction. So the way that that would work is me as an English-speaking agent, I can now take chat conversations from any language around the world. So, I may have, let's say, a Korean speaker get on our chat line. They're going to type in their question in Korean. The real-time translation will take place on that conversation. So the Korean speaker types in their question or their statement or whatever they're stating via the chat visitor window. The Korean comes to us. We real-time translate that using lots of linguistic expertise and customizations that we've built specific for that channel, for that industry, for that use case, for that customer. The real-time translation occurs. I get it as an English-speaking agent. It comes across in English. I type my reply in English, and it real-time translates back into Korean. So again, now under that scenario, me as an English-speaking agent can take interactions from any language.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Justin, I've got a couple of demographic-specific questions to you as they relate to the research results that we shared today. One of them is around a stat that you shared earlier in the presentation. You mentioned that 19% of organizations can support customers of any language over the phone, and someone who tuned in today is wondering, does that include contact centers who have translators? What's the breakdown there?
Sure. So that 19% is all 526 respondents. So that right now counts those that have a translation service and those that do not. We could definitely dive in. I don't have the split right now, but my inkling of a kind of a suspicion here would be that the stat is higher if I were to take out those with a translation service. because then we really are looking at people who are using other ad hoc solutions, we'll say, to resolve it. So that 19% does include contact centers with a translation service. Perfect.
Thanks for clarifying that one. And then another question, demographic related. Are these results that you shared today strictly from the U.S. or international as well?
Sure. So 89% of the respondents were based directly in the United States. The other 11% are from really all over the globe. I want to say, some of the localities that popped up. I know we had a good assortment in Asia, in really throughout Europe, and also South America were just some of the places that I know come top of mind that we saw respondents from.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Justin. Let's see, so many good questions coming in, so thank you guys, and as I said, keep them coming. This one just came in, and one of the attendees is wondering, can recorded phone conversations with customers be used in training multilingual support?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's certainly one of the ways that we recommend, and what we're seeing from the clients is that if they're already doing OPI or they're already doing and having conversations in particular languages, we can take all of those transcripts and we turn those into linguistic assets that will improve the overall quality of the translation and the conversation. So it's certainly a great way to get started for companies that, let's say, maybe don't have linguistic assets. It's certainly the best way for us to quickly train up a second generation translation solution so that it will provide a great customer experience across all digital and self-service channels.
Awesome. So next question that just came in. I'm curious to know if you guys have any thoughts here, but someone says, what is the customer experience like for highly technical support type content? Have you guys heard of anyone more in the high technical support type fields have utilized a similar platform for their customer service?
Sure, so I can take that one. So it's absolutely a great use case. So we have many support desks, help desks that are using the technology, and that's really where the differentiation between the first generation and the second generation is going to be critically important. So with the second generation platform, what you can do is you can actually train it and you can put in all of your technical terminology, how you want it translated. It's going to translate all that information correctly. It's going to keep the context of the conversation, and therefore it's going to provide a great translation. Without it, it's going to potentially, translate some of the technical terms. It's going to lose the context of the phrases, of the sentences, and really of the interaction.
Okay, great. And Tom, I actually have another question that I'll just direct straight to you. It's specific to GeoFluent, and one of our attendees says, what makes GeoFluent fast, and how specifically does it improve over OPI?
Sure. So sorry, was the first part of that question, is it fast?
Yes, correct, fast.
Okay, sure. So the real-time translation takes place in hundreds of milliseconds. So yes, it's extremely fast. So something like a chat interaction, the visitor nor the agent would even notice, any time delay or any issue. So it would look exactly like an English-to-English chat would today. But the real-time translation is happening behind the scenes, and it's happening extremely fast, again, in kind of the hundreds of milliseconds. And then I apologize, what was the second half of the question?
Oh, yeah, they were just asking how it improves over OPI.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so what it does, so it really complements OPI, right? So OPI is a voice-only channel. So when you enable the second generation translation solutions, you're now able to supplement your offering and not only offer voice across languages, but now you're able to offer self-service and digital channels specifically. So I'm able to offer, the socials and chat and all the other avenues that you may interact with somebody, either again in a self-service mode or in an agent-assisted mode. So what it winds up doing is it deflects calls, and it also provides customers and consumers with their preferred channels. So they can go self-serve, they can go out to a forum, and they can post their questions and get their answers. So you're improving the customer experience, you're reducing customer effort, you're adding all these channels around OPI, and ultimately you're going to reduce your inbound calls that require OPI.
Got it. All right. Well, great question. So thank you for that, and thank you, Tom, for clarifying. Tom, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of information about what the ramp-up time looks like for someone looking to implement a tool like GeoFluent. We have an attendee who's curious to know a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the implementation process is actually quite quick. So the go-to-market for the second-generation solutions is they are pre-integrated into communication platforms. So if you look at some of the leading contact center communication platforms, whether they are for forums or self-service environments or whether they're for chat and email and support tickets and cases and things of that nature. So the things like GeoFluent plug directly into those communication platforms. They're already pre-integrated. So from a how do I implement that perspective, really all we're doing is we're taking the use case and the channel and then any specific information to the brand or to the interactions, the lingo and the acronyms and the product names, et cetera. We're training the GeoFluent engine for those, and then we're able to deploy. So it's generally a 2 to 4 week deployment. So it's a very quick thing. It's again a plug-in into existing communication platforms. There's no impact on the prospects and customers other than now they can speak in their language across all these channels where they weren't able to do that. And the only impact on the agent is now they'll see both sides of the conversation. So in the agent console window, they'll see the original text in the consumer's language, and then they'll see the translated version as well. So there's no IT involvement because these are already prepackaged integrations, so therefore it's a very quick rollout.
Excellent. Thank you. So next question. This is a question that I personally hear all the time from members of our community, and it's something that Justin touched on briefly in his portion of the presentation, but curious to get thoughts from both of you on this one. So how effective are free tools like Google Translate and Microsoft Translator?
Yeah, so I can take a first stab at that, and then Justin, feel free to chime in as well. So I would put those as what I refer to as kind of first generation or straight machine translation tools. So, they certainly have value, right? And they certainly have a place. I would never say that they don't. They're great for gaining what I would call sort of personal rough context, right? But what they're not, unfortunately, well equipped for are customer communications, support or care-like interactions. As you start to get into terminology and lingo and misspellings and, some of the common problems that you're going to see in something like a chat, the first generation just would not handle, the industry terms and some of the other issues that you would see. So the translation quality would not provide a great customer experience. And there are actually many companies that have tried to leverage them in a real-time capacity for customer interactions. And the common theme that I hear across really all verticals and all industries is we tried first generation. It was not working. We wound up having to escalate to voice most of the time. We frustrated customers, so therefore we stopped using it.
Yeah, I mean, jumping in there, that's really it. What do you want the customer experience to be like, and recognize that you're using something for a purpose that's really beyond what it was intended. It wasn't meant for organizations to effectively use that as their multilingual service strategy, right? As Tom mentioned, it's great for giving some context and guidance, and in my opinion, it is still better than the "I'm sorry, I can't help you in your language. I hope you speak whatever language I speak." So that's really it, right? It's a solution. It's not the best solution. Is really where I stand.
Excellent. Yeah, the internet is a wonderful thing, but it can be dangerous too sometimes. All right, so I think we have time to fit in just a couple more questions, and this one has been asked now by a couple of people in different ways, but it'd be great if you guys could share just a little bit more information about how real-time translation can be used in self-service channels, as well as other agent-assisted, more digital-based channels.
Okay, sure. So I can take that one. So from a self-service perspective, I'll take an example. Let's go with a forum. So the typical way that a forum would work, and I'm assuming it's an external forum where customers, are posting, and there may be a moderator. So generally, the way that those would work is there are separate sites by language. So what we see if we take, let's say, an English-based company. So a company based out of the U.S. that has, ancillary languages and customers that speak other languages, what you're generally going to find is 95+% of the material out in the forum is written in the primary language. So under the scenario I just gave, that would be English. So what winds up happening is, let's say a Portuguese speaker comes into the forum. On the English side, there may be 100,000 posts, initial posts and answers. A Portuguese speaker may come in to their forum and they may see 20 posts. So what winds up happening is the Portuguese speaker comes in, they may ask a question that's already been posed on the English side. The question and the answer are there and available. However, the Portuguese speaker doesn't have access to it because it's kind of locked over on the English side. So when you omnilingual enable the forum, now what happens is all posts in all languages become available to all languages. So I may, as an English speaker, come onto that site, and I may be reading questions and answers that were written across 12 different languages. I don't notice the difference. So I'm seeing everything in English. I'm able to post my response. Now, a simplified Chinese writer may come in, and they may jump on the post. They may do a search. And again, if it's omnilingual enabled, they may be looking at posts across 25 different languages. They're able to search. They're able to get the answers they're looking for. So it significantly improves the value of the self-service channel, as now all posts become available to all languages.
Awesome. Great clarification there, so appreciate it, Tom. I see that we're quickly coming to the top of the hour, and we definitely want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I think that will be a good place to stop for now, but I do have just a few announcements to highlight before we go. First off, I know that there are a couple questions we have left here in the queue, and as I mentioned before, we will certainly be sure to follow up with you offline and make sure that those questions are taken care of. Secondly, if you haven't already, just pushed out a link to that feedback form for today's presentation again. We'd really appreciate if you take a moment to fill that out for us. And I do need to mention that you can download the slides in PDF form directly through the console today. And I would like to remind you again that you'll be receiving an email within the next couple of days to give you instructions to view the recording from today's presentation. Before we go, I do want to mention that this presentation is copyright 2016 by ICMI. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by ICMI, which is solely responsible for its content, and Lionbridge is responsible for their content and opinions. And on behalf of ICMI, our sponsor Lionbridge, and our speakers, we thank you for attending today and hope you have a great afternoon.